Within the scriptures, there are different genres. Sometimes we have parables and we have teachings. Sometimes we have stories that are recounting things that happened in Jesus' life. Sometimes we have passages of prophecy. And today, both the first reading and the gospel are talking about things that could happen at the end of times. And we don't really know when they're talking about. Some would assume that the gospel's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem that happened by the Romans in 70 AD. That's probably what they're assuming, but we're not entirely sure. The early church community, but prior to 70 AD, they were prepared for a destruction of Jerusalem. But you also then look at Jewish historians, and people could read the history that was happening. There was a militia that was developing amongst the Jewish people. The Roman Empire was getting more aggressive, and eventually, we know from Roman history that eventually the Roman Empire settles these militias, this revolution or rebellions that happen, and they often do that by destroying cities. So we know that not from Christian history, you know that from Roman history. But these passages, I don't think, are just talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. At least the Gospel's not. The first reading, we don't know what it's really talking about. But there is an openness, I think, that God can speak through the Scriptures, whether God's speaking to us now or whether our hearts are being prepared for the end times. And ultimately, our hearts should be yearning for a place of heaven. In both of these passages, they talk about this yearning for heaven, when things will be at rest. We have this beautiful last, this sentence. They will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand erect, hold your heads high, because your liberation is near at hand. Our liberation is not just from the Roman Empire. At least it wasn't for the Christian community 2,000 years ago. Our liberation is from the world of sin. Our freedom is when we have a place in God's kingdom. And here in the very last days of this liturgical year, we have these two very strange readings that I think encapsulate weird things that can happen throughout our world. But our hearts are yearning for heaven. God has created us, each and every one of us, for heaven. And as St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in Thee, O Lord. Let our hearts continue to yearn for heaven. When we hear these passages and we don't really understand what they're talking about, what we do know is that they're talking about heaven. Everything else in between, we're not entirely sure. But we know that they're talking about heaven, and we have that desire for heaven. Desire to be at peace, to be liberated, to be able to live forever, not in a world of sin, of death, of pandemic, but in a place of thanksgiving, a place of peace, a place of love. That's what God has created for us. Let us allow our hearts to continue to yearn for that place that God has created for us, the place of God's kingdom, the place of eternity.